Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our third guest speaker for Business Web Practices this fall, and his name is Peter Ramsing. So, Peter,
Thank you.
give a hand for Peter.
Thanks. So, as he introed, I'm a front-end web developer, and a little bit about me. I'll not dive into the whole front-end, back-end, full-stack conversation just yet, but so I'm a front-end web developer. I worked for a medium, large company. We did about 40 mil a year, maintained their sites, back-end, front-end, etc. And did a lot of work doing all that stuff. But where did it all begin? And kind of the ongoing adventures of front-end web developer. I found a spelling error in that earlier today. And I'm really glad I caught it because that would have been really embarrassing. Yeah, it's good. Okay, cool. Copy pasta is what that's called. So I started out, I worked at a company, you might know it, Starbucks. I was a coffee nerd, like deep, passionate coffee nerd. I roasted coffee, I drank coffee, I studied the chemical makeup of caffeine because that's cool, and I really enjoy trying to figure out the molecular structure of milk and what happens when you heated it up and what happens to the sugar as it caramelizes and what does that do, etc. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I thought I was going to continue at Starbucks. That was going to be my career. I liked computers, I dabbled in computers, I pretended like I knew how to code, but really I didn't. And there was one thing, though, that made me a little bit engineering. I wanted to innovate, and I wanted to be productive and improve productivity. And one thing at Starbucks that we did was we pooled tips every week. And at the end of every week, we would gather all the money that we made in tips that week, compare it to how many hours all of our partners worked, figured out how many dollars per hour you would earn, and then based on how many hours you'd work, you would get money. We'd then go to the bank, and we'd get a bunch of bills. Basically what we got was maybe 1 or 2 tens and a bunch of ones, went back and then did the math and then distributed, and it made everyone look like they had a different profession than coffee when they went and pulled out their wallet. And combination of error-prone and putting a bunch of ones and just seemed inefficient, I pulled out a spreadsheet because that's what I do. I love spreadsheets. Excel and me are friends. And I made something that basically would tell you really efficiently how much money you actually earned per hour, which is pretty simple. And then I figured out how many bills would be needed to evenly split, and then you could get, the 520s, and you didn't have all these ones that you just used. And I started using that. I loaded my laptop to the bank and back, and that was great. It was fun. And then I realized I need to put this on my phone. Well, I didn't know how to write a mobile app, so I started Googling, and I wanted to make it native, but I just found myself in PHP land, and I started coding, and then I made a little fancy logo in Photoshop, and Split Tip came about. It was fantastic. It took about an hour every week, ended up taking about 15 minutes. It worked fantastically. We could track things, easier for taxes. It was great. All was going well. And I ran some numbers, and at 15,000 stores, going from an hour to 15 minutes, pending how many, or the hourly wage of that partner, we're talking about $7 to $15 million worth of savings over the course of a year. And that's kind of cool. And then I was talking to Starbucks, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, we love this, except for we can't touch tips. Legal reasons, etc. Not a bad way, everything's fantastic, but even store managers can't touch tips. It's just kind of the way it works. It's kind of a separate thing. Although things have changed now, and I don't know all the details because after we had some conversations, they're like, hey, let's talk about bringing you up to Seattle. And I'm like, I have a pretty girl that I want to marry in Corvallis. Can I not move to Seattle? And they said, well, not if you want to, be a developer for us. I was like, So I moved away from Starbucks, went and worked for another company, was doing a little bit of web development, a little bit of business and marketing, learned all sorts of things. It was a fun startup environment. And then after that, I migrated to my first full-time paid to write code. And that was kind of my migration, completely self-taught and all that fun stuff. Now I'm starting a new gig tomorrow, but I do consulting. I do online open source stuff. Online, everything's online these days. Open source stuff. And open source, I maintain a large open source project called LostGrid. It's I'm trying to keep the buzzwords at a minimum. It's a post-CSS plugin that makes responsive grids. Let's see, there's buzzwords in there. Basically what it takes is, vanilla CSS, another buzzword. This is fun. It's like the buzzwords we live in. I wrote a little, almost say like I don't want to call it a tirade, but a kind of like state of web, which I'll get to in a moment. And it's just like filled with buzzwords. Basically what it does is it takes CSS that you write and with a couple of syntax things that our API, hey buzzwords, that our code takes, it spits out a buzzword.
That's cool.
Yeah. Or I could do transpile. We can get into the compiled and transpiled. I made a video tutorial yesterday, and I used the word compiled, and I'm rewatching the video going, oh, no, it's not compiled, it's transpiled, and we can get to that later. Anyway, and so I do some of that. That was, last month I was downloaded about 23,000 times. So it's decently large. I do support for that. Maintain that, improve it, help people out all over the place, make Code Pens, which is an online place where you can basically write code. It has both HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. You can use Lost within it. And then you can see the results all in one page. It's pretty fantastic, so I'll help people out and do that. That is what I do on a daily basis. And let's talk about agenda. So discuss, Firefox. I should have tested this on Firefox. Nonetheless, 1, 2, 3, yep. Interesting. Yeah, that's a fun bug. If it's a bug, I don't know. Anyway, I digress. Those numbers are supposed to be black. Humorous. Anyway, agenda, state of web. And we're talking about the ongoing adventures, so we're just going to go through a day. Morning, afternoon, and evening. So, state of web. I figured vamp was a funny thing. So I'm not one to just read verbatim, but yesterday after like reading actually a blog posts that he wrote about like the state of JavaScript and kind of thing. You shared. Yes, you shared. I was kind of almost in like this depressive state of how do you get into code these days? I mean, back when I was started like split tip, I hopped on GoDaddy. I got you didn't even call them instances. I just got a server. I can't remember what it was exactly. Then I used cPanel and buzzwords. Yeah. Okay. cPanel basically a way to administer the databases, different users to FTP, so you can transfer files on. And basically, I created a database and a couple of tables within the database. And then within my code, I literally just synced it via FTP, which is like, now I look at that, I cringe, but it worked. And in about an hour, I had both a database, I had a backend and a front end all in one. It was super simple, and I was up and running. Now, I'm working on a project, and my wife, every other day or so, asks, how's that project going? And I'm still working on getting my user authentication working. I don't know what my object layer is going to look like right now. I'm not entirely sure what database I want to use. I've been sitting on it for about a week and a half, and I've tried a couple of things. And once I do get it set up, I need to get like both a development environment, a staging environment, and a production environment. I need to make sure all my tests run. That's just before I even get to any code, really. I mean, I'm just working on infrastructure. And it's nasty. It's really, really, really hard. Being a developer is really, really hard right now. You want to start a project with React. I mean, I did a kind of in the dev world when you want to go like play on something for maybe you kind of like set aside. I want to go 2 days. I'm just going to work on something. The goal is not to deal with it ever again. It's just to experiment. Sometimes they're called a spike. In our case, that's what the term was within our group. So I went and spiked on React, which is a JavaScript library. They say framework library. That's another conversation for another time. A JavaScript library that is, you've possibly heard of Angular, Ember, Backbone, etc. It's kind of the same thing along those lines. And it continually just kept breaking on me. Like I wrote maybe 4 or 5 lines of code myself, and if I did like how many lines of code were actually involved, it was like at this point like over 20,000 lines of code minified of like 4 lines of mine. Like, this is the world that we live in these days. It's nuts. It's maddening. I do for instance, this the site that this is on, or not the site, but the project that's kind of, that's managing these slides. It's all pretty. It took like almost 45 seconds to download everything that it needed, all the code. 45 seconds to download just some code. It's thousands of little packages here and there. I mean, for my one little package, if you want a dependency, like go down to, it's just crazy. And I don't mean to go into, but this is the state, and it's extremely difficult. And I'm not meaning to say that as a negative thing, or I'm kind of going with that. And the daily kind of thought process that goes into what I have to deal with, and I'm kind of crossing the bridge of kind of doing a combination of explaining what I do, sharing a little bit of the horror stories, the good stories, because there are good stories. Good stories. I wrote a little tiny little app that could have saved Starbucks $7 to $15 million. Good stories. Like, those are the things. Like, that was so cool. Anyway, good stories. Web is awesome. You kind of go through all these trails, and I'm kind of combination of here's my life. Also, here's some advice if you're jumping into this stuff. And the reason why I'm kind of going into this like dark, hazy side of web is the thing that keeps me going. Why I'm not just like banging my head on the wall every time something fails to compile or transpile, when a dependency that I had doesn't follow semantic versioning, which basically allows you to say, so you see version numbers like, first version number dot second version number dot third version number. In theory, if you're following what's called semantic versioning or semver, the smallest number, so I guess the third number, that's for patches. You can increment that. You can push new software. When you do that, it should have no breaking changes, period. Like, your software should work exactly the same. The second one, then that could be like small syntax things, some patches, maybe some bug fixes, but it should not change the underlying API. Trying to explain buzzwords. Is the helping explaining the buzzwords? Maybe, sort of? Cool. Does anyone else need caffeine? Right.
The state of the web is complex.
It's crazy. Anyway, I won't go into that too much. I can go down rabbit trails trying to explain all the. I'll just try to avoid the keywords and all those fun things. Nonetheless, understanding the principles of what you're doing is what will keep you going. And that's kind of like in my daily life, in the ongoing adventures. It's about understanding what's happening underneath all the layers that you're starting to download and install, and everything that you're adding on top of it. Principles. And what does that mean? Understanding JavaScript, just JavaScript, or CSS, or HTML. I know a lot of people that have senior developer in their name, and it's nothing against them, but they couldn't write a basic HTML page without looking at some boilerplate. And even myself sometimes, I forget, but going back, understanding the basics. To break this cycle of being depressed about the web breaking, understanding what the web is there for, why it's there, is what gets me through every day. And I think it's beautiful. It's fantastic. What other programming language out there can you write a couple of lines of code, quite frankly, just a couple of lines of code, push it somewhere onto a web server, and anyone in the world can access that instantly, quote unquote. There's nothing like it. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. I can write a little micro app that allows my wife and I to send messages back and forth. Yes, we could text, but what's the fun in that? It's beautiful. It's fantastic. And then I'll sidebar super quick on the whole front end, back end, and full stack. Front end developers touch how things look. Back end developers touch how things operate on the back end, how they deal with data, etc. That's super high level. And then a full stack kind of says that they do all the above. With all the, like, there's my rambling of like the state of web. With all of that, it's extremely difficult to be a full stack developer, and that's kind of why I chuckle. I've been called a full stack developer. I don't care. It's fantastic. I think a really great front end developer knows their back end code and knows how infrastructure works. But I'm absolutely no expert, and that's why I kind of try to stay away from being a full stack, because I don't know it as well as I know front end. And that's, I mean, my focus is actually CSS, like modern CSS within grids. That's like my focus. And I literally spent like 7 hours yesterday, like studying like just the calc aspect of CSS, which is something within CSS that you can basically just run calculations based on like percentage and pixels. It's fantastic. But like 7 hours yesterday experimenting and working. So that's like the expertise level that we're in these days. You have to be very specialized. So are we all like tracking? Maybe. Do we have any like questions, thought processes? Am I like trying to maybe?
So Peter, for the people in the audience who aren't familiar with the difference between HTML, CSS, and JavaScript,
yeah.
Can you just give a quick overview?
Yeah. So HTML, I'm going to be really obnoxious here. Let's see if it will let me. Inspect. Heck yeah. Perfection. All right, we'll see if we can get this. All right. Maybe I just want to view source. All right, well, let's see here. HTML, document type, HTML. This is what contains, you can see there, it says morning. Oops, hello, maybe. You can see it barely there. There's that copy, morning. Now, that is what the HTML is. Now there is this color, but ignore that. So HTML holds where the document is, so that's a header, 2 style elements. Here's a paragraph element, another paragraph element, and these are the elements and the copy and the content. That's what HTML stows. Then there's CSS, and that's what says you're white. You have an opacity of 0. Your visibility is hidden. There's a margin on you, and there's a margin top and a margin bottom. So it kind of says where you are, what you look like. And then there's JavaScript, which I will not be able to really pull out here easily. JavaScript is what allows us to interact and watch for my, or listen, quote unquote, listen for my space bar, and there we go through those, or my arrow keys. And JavaScript is what tells CSS to then change. So JavaScript listens for those. Is that all making sense? So HTML holds the content, CSS then makes it look pretty, or not pretty if you're doing it wrong. And then JavaScript is what manipulates that. Is that sweet? Any other questions? Like, in all seriousness, like I get kind of cross at people who, and I apologize. I suppose I should have looked a little bit closer. I didn't realize the audience wasn't necessarily a developer audience, which isn't a bad thing. Like, one thing I really hate developers saying is, oh, business just doesn't understand why we need to do that. And then they push that blame onto business. That's wrong. It's wrong. Marketing shouldn't have to understand all the ins and outs of how your JavaScript is operating and why you need tests to make sure that their SEO strategies aren't going to break. That's not marketing's job. That is your job as, wow, I'm getting passionate about that. But like, developers are not better than any other aspect of the business. In fact, actually, like sales and development always seem to be at odds in groups that I've been working with. It's actually kind of fun. Like, for the last about a month and a half, I've been doing a ton of consulting, and it's been fantastic. I've been seeing all these things, and I've been seeing trends, like how sales and development can sometimes just butt heads. But does development not understand it? Without sales, they literally do not have jobs. Like, and I think sometimes like we get high and mighty as development. Like I turned down a job that they literally were like, hey, like, we're a startup, we'll give you $150K your first year to be a front-end web developer. I was like, no, I do not add that much value. Sorry. No, that company ended up running out of money because development is not any better, and they need to learn how to communicate with others about how they think, how they're operating, and why it's important. So if anything, if it's kind of like when I go into like wine tasting or coffee tastings, if you feel like whoever is hosting that wine or coffee tasting is making you feel like a fool, they're the one that's wrong. Your coffee that you like might be Folgers, and that's your enjoyment factor. Like, that's fantastic, and it shouldn't make you feel. So anyway, if you have questions, like, please ask. Like, it is our job as developers to help relay what we do in a meaningful way that is understandable. And it's what we do is crazy and confusing. I mean, I use broccoli to build out my site. Like, how does that make sense? Anyway, so yeah, go for it.
What are the trends that you're seeing right now? What are the things that you think, in this next year, I've got to learn to do this?
So to repeat the question that
you
said, what are the trends that Peter's seeing that are absolutely needed to be a up-to-date web developer in today's world?
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to answer that with two questions, or in like two ways. If you're starting with nothing, starting from absolute scratch, what do you need to be learning in these in the next year? How to write JavaScript, not how to write React, not how to write Angular, not how to write Ember or any other framework. In fact, actually, not even how to write jQuery. And I'm throwing buzzwords in here, but if you don't know, if you don't want to learn coding, that's great. These buzzwords don't matter. If you do, they'll make sense. Learn how to write JavaScript, just JavaScript, and make it do what you want it to do. And write as complex as you can. And that starts with writing something super simple and adding on it, and adding on it, and adding on it. But yeah, to answer your question, if you're coming from nothing, JavaScript. Learn it super, super well. And reading the Mozilla Developer Network documentation, and even just like the JavaScript spec itself, will get you so far. It'll be hard because you'll be reading all these things about React and learning this and that and all these different things, but none of that matters if you cannot write great code. And in about 4 or 5 years, there's going to be a bunch of React developers that don't know how to fix anything because all they know is how to write React and not the underlying language, which is JavaScript.
What is React?
Oh, sorry. React is a library. I'll just React.js. It is a library. Wow, that's impressive. Let's go here. Wow. Okay, this is one of those moments where you go, wow, Chrome and Google really know me because I could search React and it would know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe. Anyway, it's a Facebook tool that allows you to build interfaces for the front end. So kind of, it manages your different states. So if I'm logged in or not, it'll show you different user interface things, maybe sign up, log in, different buttons, and it manages all of that. And so if you wanted to build like a tip calculator, you might basically just build all of that, and you would talk to React, and you would tell React to add an input here, and it'd all be in a React, quote unquote, React syntax. Yeah, it's in a sense, it's almost a language on top of JavaScript, but it's a library of functions that you can tell to do things that with JavaScript. Wow, this is actually really hard to answer. That's a good question. Yeah, is that sort of answering the question? It's.
How about it's Facebook's extension that allows the modification of the browser window to happen in a lot speedier fashion than would say JavaScript, jQuery, and some other things.
Yeah.
It's Facebook being really super smart, coming up with their own way and really understanding the way the browser operates and the way what we call the document object model, which is all the HTML structure, and knows how, and took their own spin on how to manipulate that as fast as they could and as efficient as they could.
Yeah. It's actually one of those things. That's like, I know exactly how it is, what it is, how the virtual DOM works. Like actually explaining it. This is why actually more developers should talk to people who don't know anything about development. And that's not a bad thing. I don't want to, anytime you hear me saying like, don't know anything about development, it's not a slam at all. So please don't take it that way. But yeah, it's fantastic for us to then understand these things. So,
but the conversation that we would have had in this room maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago would have just been HTML, CSS, and JavaScript without all the other 433 buzzwords
it's crazy
that Peter mentioned.
So does that sort of answer? It is extremely complex answer in a sense, but it's a tool set that sits on top of JavaScript that allows you to more efficiently do things.
What would would there be a corollary to it in another software program just for HTML?
Not really. Yeah, and some of the things, so I've dabbled with React. I haven't done a ton in it. I made a few apps. But one thing,
Who asked that question? Willis?
Yeah, guilty.
So I think playing on what Peter stated earlier, that you really have to have a good, solid understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We wouldn't even have the React conversation until you really understood, at a very firm level and grasp on before you would even be introduced to something like React.
I think in a sense it almost proves the point that I was saying. If you don't know anything, you don't care about React yet.
Right.
All you want to learn is JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. Then once you start using those tools, you go, oh yeah, and then you're like, oh man, the virtual DOM.
Would you say there are people that are coming out that have an expertise in it that because they've forgotten how to use?
Yeah, they've forgotten.
Left floats.
Yeah, I get questions quite a bit that say, hey, your frame, or like, so my tool, they'll say, it's broken, it's not doing the right thing. I'm like, no, it's doing the right thing. You just don't understand the underlying principles of what CSS, what the visual code is trying to do. You are too focused and you don't know you don't know what's actually happening at the base layer. And that's what's actually the problem, not the library that I built that's doing that. And yeah, so that I would say in a couple of years there's going to be a lot of companies hurting because they hired green, so newbie developers that know how to build something in React because they grabbed a template and started building and hacking on it, but don't know what's actually happening. And they're going to be running into these bugs that they have no idea how to solve. And they'll Google it, and they'll copy someone's answer, and they'll paste it into it's a prevalent issue. And I see it a lot, and it's going to really start hurting us.
Yeah, and that's why you're here, Willis.
Right. Okay. I think what I was looking for example, there's Dreamweaver, right? People use.
Oh, so Dreamweaver's a tool. It'd be like a wrench to a car. So if React is a car, Dreamweaver's a wrench. And a tool set and a toolbot. Yeah, Dreamweaver doesn't touch any of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. So if coding languages, if I were to compare them to modern day languages, like Spanish, French,
Sure.
etc., they all are different and they're all completely different ideas and alphabets. Is coding languages kind of the same, or do they all if I learned one coding language, if I learned HTML, is it going to be a completely different ballgame to learn CSS, or is it going to kind of be similar and that they both do the same thing? Or
Okay.
I hope I'm wording that question right.
Yeah. You're totally wording that question right. I'm going to answer it super quick right here, and then we'll talk later about it afterwards, or just hang out with Bruce, and he can explain it in even more detail. And then we'll jump into the second part of the question. So the question was, if I learn HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, or Python, or Haskell, do they, if I learn Haskell, does it compute with all the rest? Yes and no. HTML, so the languages have what's called syntax, how you write different things. HTML is kind of its own animal, although now I won't get into that. Yeah, HTML is kind of its own animal. It's, pardon?
It's a markup language.
Yeah, it's a markup language. So it doesn't have functions. So you couldn't create repeatable code blocks that you would run that would do math. It basically says this is a header element, this is a container, this is a list, And JavaScript and CSS don't really do that. CSS, it's, again, completely different from HTML, where it says, I want to take that header and I want to make it have the color blue. Or in this case, I want to take that list, that ordered list, and I want to make the color white. And then the list itself, elements, to be black, which somewhere in there's a bug, or I wrote it wrong. We'll just blame me, because I'm the developer.
Sounds like it's a good upfront. HTML is a good upfront for just getting like words on a page.
Yes. Yeah.
Since CSS is good for like actually designing it.
Yep. And then JavaScript is a little bit on the, JavaScript is, man, this is, see, I have no formal training. This is where it's like, it's really, really good for me. I've read a bunch of books, but this is where like going, it's Bruce will teach you all this stuff. JavaScript and Python and PHP, they have different syntax to do math or rounding things or calculating things. JavaScript and those other languages, not every single one, they will have similar things. So for instance, I haven't written a lot of Python, but I was sitting on a Python class. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, like I'm following that. Okay, yeah, you're not using parentheses there, you're using a colon, but I'm following. So those kind of all sit in the same, and they're completely different, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble with a bunch of developers. They're completely different, but they're slightly the same, and you can follow them. They have functions, they have loops, but yeah, HTML and CSS are kind of completely different animals. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Would it be fair to say that JavaScript and some of these other languages are things that make your web page not just be a flat something you look at, they give it life, they bring it action,
Yeah.
make it do stuff?
Yep, they make it do stuff.
Okay.
Yep. And then to kind of go back into your question, if you are a developer that knows a bunch, JavaScript is starting to rapidly increase its development rates in regards to new APIs that are being opened up to it. So ES 2015, understanding lots of the core of what actually changed would be really, really powerful. And learning how to write tests that cater well with what you're actually trying to test for. One thing that I wrote in here, I think the quote was like, we're being shamed into writing tests and we don't know why and for what. And again, this is kind of like if you've been in development, so if you know, basically you write tests that kind of test whether or not your code is working. Yeah, but lots of times we're writing tests that just basically say, so within your code you say color blue, and then you write a test, make sure that the color is blue. So what's the purpose behind that? Well, you would write a test then maybe for like addition or I digress. So I won't go into that, but writing tests that are really, really meaningful, that are actually proving functionality and not just that you coded it right. And it's an interesting thing that I'm seeing a lot of people doing. They're writing just tests to prove that they wrote their code right. It's like, no, write a test that shows what it's actually doing. And so we're spending a lot of time building those, and then we have to maintain those. So in the next year, those are kind of some trends, I suppose.
So would you suggest then that students here at Clark spend some time learning unit testing, maybe even try to find a way to do independent studies in unit testing? Is that something that valuable?
Yeah, so writing tests is extremely valuable.
Okay.
And then I'll put a little carrot, writing good tests is like that's the quintessence. I'm a huge believer in don't add a tool unless you need it. Which like when I'm working on a new website, I literally am starting with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Actually, there's no JavaScript yet. It doesn't need it. HTML and CSS, that's all it needs. There's no, language that I'm using to compile, transpile. That's another story for another time. But transpile like less into CSS because that's another animal. Less is a language that basically you can do some things more efficiently. Less Sass stylus. And yeah, those are the pre-processed language that then process into CSS, so you can just write more efficient code. I don't even have that in place yet because I don't need it. If you're writing, let's say you're writing a function that, you're writing a JavaScript function that needs to add a bunch of numbers together, perform some other operations, and return a value. And that's a critical component of your application. That's when I would say, well, I guess I'll take a look at some test libraries and start writing a test for that. But I wouldn't start a fresh project and say, hey, I'm going to start writing the tests right now, because if you don't have anything to test, there's no reason for it. And then you'll just start writing tests that don't prove valuable. And then you have to maintain those tests or rip them out. So yeah, independent studies, go take a look at some stuff. Something that Exercism, kind of like exorcism, but Exercism is a fantastic learning tool. I'm gonna write that down. I'll post kind of the links and the conversation notes that I have. So yeah, I'll have these Exercism. And basically what it is it has a failing test, and you have to make that test pass. And that's actually a great way to kind of learn how tests are written and things like that. So yeah, that's, all right, so that answers that question. Am I leaving any hanging questions?
What about JavaScript in the back end? Is it something
Node?
that's actually catching on?
Oh, it's not even catching on. It's like, boom. There's JavaScript running on embedded. So like embedded being like this watch, I suppose, like is embedded circuitry, right? So it's not something I actively program to, or even like this screen here, that's kind of an embedded device. There's JavaScript running on those now. I mean, NASA has, JavaScript was originally a front-end language, which means, or a client-side. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are client-side languages.
Browser.
Yeah, I'm getting there. No, client-side languages, which mean they live in the browser. They are sitting right here. Like you see them, that's what they do. Back-end languages like PHP, Python, those sit on the servers. So peter.coffee, my website, there's servers sitting there, and they're running things like Python and PHP. And front-end developers like writing JavaScript, and they needed to write some stuff on the back end, decided, hey, we'll make it so that this works on the back end. And then came Node.js, which is JavaScript that runs on the back end. So it's everywhere. Walmart, I think, is 100% Node.js. Yeah, it's absolutely
so
prevalent.
You're seeing a trend away from PHP at this point and into Node.js, or would you say PHP still has
huge value because everything's written in it. And that's kind of like because I can do a little bit of PHP and I can do Perl, actually, like I have massive value to some orgs because they sit there and like, we've got this stuff and no one will touch it because they made fun of PHP so much that they never touched it or learned it, and they don't know how to deal with it, or they just won't touch it. Like I have developers, and I'll hang out with them, and they're like, PHP is like, yeah, right, it runs the world, so okay. So yeah, it is, people are not starting projects in PHP. Like a project I'm working on, it's either going to be Ruby on Rails, which is another language and library, or a framework. Actually, that's a framework. Or it might be Node.js. I'm kind of deciding between the two, and I wouldn't do it in PHP.
So you're saying that newer projects that you're seeing are being started in back-end languages other than PHP?
Yes.
It depends where you work.
Yeah, it totally depends where we work. There's one company I contract to, we have to use PHP because that's all that's sitting on their server. And that's all that their upper management will allow. Because in large organizations, things move a lot more slowly, and that's actually one thing. I was having a conversation. This guy, he wanted to kind of like create some new tools and do some fancy stuff. And hold on, large orgs can't just go grab those new tools. Let's try to wrap them in an older tool that they're already using. And yeah, so yeah, definitely trends are moving that way. But I in a sense, I kind of see almost two styles of developers. There's the developers still with the pocket protector, and then there's the lumberjack developers that drink fancy coffee and ironic t-shirts. And they're the ones that are starting all these projects, and humorously enough, then I get hired to go clean them up.
So Peter, aren't there a lot of debates going on the web of late talking about how things like what Peter was talking about, Node.js, JavaScript on the server, have gotten out of control as far as what we call dependencies on modules to interact and work with another, break things constantly. Yeah. So there's this huge, while Node has become extremely popular, extremely powerful, extremely wide adapted, right? It's not this thing that doesn't have faults.
Oh, it's, yeah. Well, for example, there was the left pad incident, which, and I don't want to fool it or mess up the story too much, but a dependency that, I don't want to say everyone, but thousands and thousands and thousands of developers were relying on, called left pad, suddenly was removed. And what happens a lot, so whenever I deploy
The developer got pissed or something, right?
Yeah, I don't know all the details. There's a lot of, nonetheless, the tool was not there anymore. So whenever I build out these sites that I'm working on, typically what happens is I submit the code, it goes to a server, and it then goes and fetches all these dependencies in, and then it builds it in real time. So it's back in the day, you just kind of like would usually just push over new code and just overwrite the old stuff. Now we're spinning up new, and basically it went out. It tried to grab that left pad and said, "Uh-oh, you're not there," and that was like half the world just like boom. Yeah. No new sites could get built out. Like even like some of the sites I was like, our tests would come back and they'd say, "We can't find this. We're not working." All of these code bases relied on a tool that just disappeared. And that's one instance. Lots of times, like I said about Semver, where you have, let's see if I do. Anyway,
so
where
was it like open source or something
yep.
like that?
No, and that's the thing. All this stuff is open source. Like, so for instance, like there's large companies using LostGrid. Tomorrow, I could go completely empty out the API, submit a new version, and make it a patch version. So it's pretending like it's just a minor tweak that will have no functional change. And any site that's using it that doesn't have their versions like hard-coded in there, and that's typically what you would do. You'd say only use 7.1.0. But some orgs, they'll say, we'll use 7.0 or 7.1, anything, because those patches will not break anything, right? But I could totally mess you up, and I could take down massive sites that fast. And sometimes I might do it by accident. What if I accidentally publish the wrong bit of code, right? Like, it's super, super fragile, and it's breaking all. Like, kind of one of the things that I was waxing poetic about was every now and then I'll be working on a project and it just will not transpile, and it won't build everything, and I don't understand because the person didn't write good errors, and I don't know why, and they changed something and they didn't realize that they were breaking. I mean, I've done it. I rolled a patch out and it actually had a breaking change. I didn't know. It was an accident. It happens. Nothing malicious. I'm a nice guy. Sometimes. All the time. I tip. It's okay. I'm good. Anyway. So yeah, it is a really, really hard dilemma. What do? You can either take advantage, like this project I'm working on, I can either, what we'd say, roll my own, build my own authentication layer, make it so that I control how the users interact. It'll take me about 3 or 4 days of full coding to make it work, be secure, or I could just use a service like Firebase that'll do it all for me. But what happens when Firebase goes away? Or, for example, there was a company called Parse, which is actually a Facebook group. I built a lot of Parse apps. They're fantastic. They don't work anymore. Parse is gone. Massive, massive companies, not that I wrote, but other companies, they've relied on Parse and gone. They made a beautiful rollout of, we're going to open source this, you can pull this in, use it on your, they did it right. They did about a year. I think they actually gave like 18 months notice, so like they did it right, but just like, gone. You can't use it anymore. And massive companies were relying on this as their sole data storage. It happens. So, anyway,
welcome to the web.
It's crazy, but it's beautiful at the same time. So,
you start using a lot of external libraries, how do you avoid having security problems by somebody doing something on those libraries, even though it's been vetted by the people?
Yeah. So the question is, so if you're using external libraries, how do you know that they're not being insecure? You got to be smart. I've been going back and forth on a blog post. The unfortunate thing in the web is you kind of have to have some tough skin, because if you write something and someone doesn't like it, you can. But I'm working on a post where basically I think dependency management should be solved the same way you solve employee management. You hire good employees, you compensate them well. Not that like we go pay open source, but like you should deal with them the same way you do with employees. And if they're not behaving well, get rid of them. Like, it's hard. So yeah, you should vet, and that's why like I'll be watching tutorials and they'll say, npm install this, npm install this, npm install this. What are you doing? Like, what are all of these? Okay, I did a tutorial yesterday where I said npm install. Oops. Anyway, so yeah,
Welcome to the state of the web.
it's crazy. How much time do I have left? I've got 5:14.
8 hours.
8 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, you told me I had 9.5, right?
So you got about another 15 minutes that we want to ask some more questions.
Sounds good. All right, let's do like hold questions, and I'll like go into like the other side with like, so how do you deal with all this, right? So I'll kind of explain my adventures. Maybe it's the boring side, maybe it has validity, maybe this helps. So hopefully this isn't too like preachy, and then I'll preface all of this. This is my adventure in front end. This might not be yours. And for example, I mentioned in the morning I do some things. That might be what you do in the evening. Oftentimes you hear, this is the greatest way to brew coffee for that person, but they don't say that. So I'm specifying, this is how I do it. Take it as you will. However, it works for you. Maybe one thing works for you. As my mom says, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So maybe only one thing, but I digress. So this is not the best way. It just works for me. My morning. Coffee. Yay, stock art. It's properly licensed. I start my morning refreshing. I see lots of quote-unquote unicorns, people that are way too special for their own good, coding till 2 in the morning. They don't get any sleep. They deliver amazing stuff, but they just never sleep. I don't believe in that. You see their trends. They like go crazy and they deliver a bunch of code. Then they drop off the face of the earth for about 6 months, and then they do it again. Refreshing. We should be refreshed. Sleep well. Think about the long term. And that's, every single day I could stay up until 2 a.m. writing code, and sometimes I do. But my wife reminds me, just get some sleep. You'll be a lot better the next day. So I start my morning just refreshed. And I start by planning my day. Even though things are changing super rapidly, I'd like to just take a look at what my day looks like. And I kind of work through different tasks that I might have to do. I set them all up and kind of just create a checklist for the day. Nothing too long term. I just try to figure out what I'm going to do today. And that's that. Next, in the morning, that's where my brain works. I do some problem solving. So in the front end world, lots of things just involve problem solving, like trying to figure out why calc is not working the way it should on the Windows web browser Edge, but it's working on Chrome, but it's not working on Firefox. So I spend my morning usually problem solving. It's the best time for me. It could be all sorts of things. We already got into it. So maybe a build just isn't working, or a test is not passing. So that's what I spend my morning doing. Then I say no. In this state of dependencies everywhere, I say no to a lot of dependencies or tasks, or there's so much stuff we could be doing. In fact, I say no presently right now, and presently I say no to React. I don't think React is bad, but it's not what I'm doing right now. Right now, I'm working with Ember and Angular. I don't want to work on React, so I say no. To the extent, I think a good marketing person might say no to learning how to write code. Maybe they should understand a little bit, but they should say no, because their job is marketing strategies. So I take that internally as a web developer and say, I don't want to learn all that there is to know about PHP 7, because if I do, it's going to take me away from what I need to do. So I say no. I say no to meetings that I might not need, things like that. It's really, really hard in this fast-paced era to be meeting with someone new or this or that. I get about 100 emails a day now. It's just getting bad, but 30 of them I just ignore entirely, of people asking, hey, can you help me do this or that? And I'm not super, super special. Someone built a library, they handed it off to me, and now I'm famous-ish. Anyway, say no. I do it a lot. That's usually what I do in the morning. Afternoon, more stock art. I wonder where that is. Looks like New Zealand, maybe? England? Outward work. In the afternoon, I typically work on some outward work. And what I mean by that is not my code. Or my code that's like Lost Grid that other people are using. I try to get out of my organization, out of what I'm doing right now. See what other people are doing. See the trends. Maybe look at some React stuff. This is kind of where I'm going to get out of my box. And I do this to just make sure that I'm aware of what's happening. I understand the left pad incident. It's a really, really important thing that I value. It could be only 15 minutes. It could be an hour and a half. I think, if I'm hourly, I'd probably do this off the clock, I suppose. I might, just pile it in with my lunch, but kind of like stay up on stuff. But if I'm salary, I think actually, like most companies value this actually. So, for instance, like maybe when I start hiring people, this is absolutely something I'll pay them to do. So, outward work, refactoring. I try every single day to make my code a little bit better. Just because I wrote the code perfectly, because I write perfect code, that's why people pay me the big bucks. I don't write perfect code. I write good code. There's a blog post about that. But every single time I interact with that code, it might get a little bit dirty. And these aren't buzzwords, I'm just kind of metaphorically. It just gets dirty, or I might be able to make things more efficient. So I spend time refactoring, and that might be, we were joking about this in Bruce's class about how deleting lines of code can be depressing. But actually, I see deleting lines of code is awesome. If you don't need that code, and you can have the same functionality in less code, yeah. So refactoring. So I spend a little bit of time in my afternoon refactoring. A little bit every day goes a long way to keeping your code from being legacy and never wanting to touch it again. Communicating. And this is something that kind of falls into all aspects. Well, it does fall into all aspects, but I think communicating as a developer, I've kind of already mentioned it, is vital. Lots of times as developers, we can just not communicate because we don't want to, or we're lazy, or as my mom sometimes says, I'm sorry this letter is so long, I didn't have enough time to write a shorter one. Writing and communicating is hard, really, 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 really hard. And in the age of Slack, where you can just get pinged at all hours, we're oftentimes not communicating efficiently or well. There's instances for Slack to be like, it's fantastic. I love Slack because it's right there. It's always there.
They're laughing at me.
Yeah, because you're always, no. Bruce and I are a little bit different. I check my email once, maybe twice a day. On sometimes actually, like in my work email, like if you email me, it says, hey, I check my email at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Sorry, if you have an emergency, call me. You don't have my number. Oops. It's because, I get interrupted. And so, I communicate and I kind of batch it, so I'm in the mood. Here's a fun tip. If you get asked a question a lot, in fact, most questions I get asked, I write the answer in a document. I then copy and paste that answer in there, and next time I would get asked that question, I grab it from that document, maybe refactor it a little bit, and voila, there I go. Or I use an app called Text Expander, which I just type a few keywords, and there it goes. So, communicating. Really, really value the communication. There's a lot, especially in this remote world where we're not working in the same office. It can be extremely hard if you don't know how to communicate well. And people don't know how to spell well in grammar. It's vital. It's really, really, really important. Just kind of looking demographic, it seems like this is kind of the wrong target audience because you guys understand the importance of communication and writing and grammar and spelling and not leaving spelling errors in your presentations. But yeah, it's really, really, really good. Pixel pushing. Basically what this means is I'm actually now, after spending the majority of my day building foundations, fixing some stuff, now I actually put images up. And this in late afternoon is when I find the best time for me to actually put the images in. Take all the copy that marketing gave me, start putting it in, adjust some of the stylings, change the colors, and do the quote-unquote pixel pushing and pushing things around and matching it to the design. So that's kind of what my afternoon looks like. And then in the evening, I go sailing. No, I don't. I wish I would. Refreshing. I think it's vital that we don't code all the time. Have a hobby. Drink lots of coffee because you like it. Do things that aren't coding. Refresh yourself. And that's what I do. I go for walks with my wife or watch Netflix with my wife. Because that's what we do. Lots and lots of Netflix because it's awesome. Thank you, Patrick, my brother, for letting us have access to it. Is that legal now? Didn't they just... Maybe I shouldn't say that in something that's... Anyway. We're family. It counts, right? Anyway. Yeah, refresh. Don't code all the time. Relax. Kind of under the same thing, but in this one, I see relaxing as sitting at a wall, not doing anything. How often do we... Or watch television without your cell phone? That's one I can't do these days. It's terrible. I want to institute a rule for my wife and I when we're watching television. If the television is on, our phones are in a basket. It's hard, but doing nothing. letting boredom envelop your mind. Letting those creativities come out of boredom. I find myself sometimes if I have a problem, I just stare at a wall, like relaxing, truly relaxing. So that's what I try to do in the evening, stare at walls. My wife walks into my office. What are you doing? It's a wall, it's pretty. Planning. I do a little bit of planning in the evening, just quickly look at my day. Hey, what did I get done? What didn't I get done? How could I improve? I try to assess my day and kind of quickly plan maybe the rest of my day, or take a look at what my week might look like and kind of prep my day the next day. It's really nice for me to go to bed bed at night knowing I have a 6 a.m. meeting. I should probably know that in the evening instead of in the morning when I'm checking my schedule then. So do a little bit of planning and resting. It's a circle of life, right? It's, go to bed early-ish as much as you can. Anyway, it's not all about the code, and that's kind of what this, in a sense, this slide I wanted to kind of instigate. My life doesn't revolve around code. My wife might disagree with me, but it really doesn't. I read a lot of books, podcasts that have nothing to do with code, and I think it makes me a better developer. So there we go. All right. So that's kind of my adventures. Maybe there's a little bit of learning there.
Peter, how long have you been a web developer?
I have been paid to write code for 3 years now.
What was the first thing you ever built besides the tip share thing?
Split tip?
Split tip.
Tastebook, coffee tastebook. It was basically at Starbucks. Actually, I have one here. Not the Starbucks version, but it's a little book that you can record your coffees in it. So name of the coffee, the roaster, the different the brewed, all the different things, and then the different flavors. You see them for beer and other things as well, beer and wine and cheese and chocolates. So I made basically this just in a digital form. So I made a little web app that did that.
What'd you write it in?
PHP.
And?
PHP, CSS. Actually, and I used Bootstrap, which is a framework for creating grids and user interfaces. Yeah. And actually no HTML. It was all PHP with HTML in the PHP. So it was
database?
MySQL. Yeah. Yes?
Are you doing your development HTML5 and CSS3?
Yeah, so HTML5, yes. So most of my development is HTML5. As far as CSS3, we are CSS has migrated away from being in those main version numbers. They now have different versions for different areas. For instance, we're in CSS, soon to be in CSS Grid version 1, and then CSS Flexbox version 2 now. So yeah, if anything, can I use .com? I'll write that down. This is where I live. A lot, trying to figure out what language am I using. So, or not language, or what am I using? So we'll take a look at Flexbox. Boom. So whether I'm using CSS3 or not, if it's not working where I need it to and what I need it to, I won't use it. And that's actually one thing that I do a lot, and I have to work with designers a lot because they're like, oh, I saw someone do this. This is fantastic. I'm like, yeah, but it's not valid in some browsers. So even if it's in the spec, if you can't use it, you can't use it. So CSS is a bit different because there are things that are considered stable but don't work. So does that sort of answer the question? Yep. Yeah.
So when you started learning all of this on your own, so you were working at Starbucks, were you working at the store, and then just when you go home, you'd read books and practice things?
Yeah. I would open the store at 4:30 in the morning, or I'd get to the store at 4:30 in the morning to open at 5. On my break, I'd grab my laptop, sit, and code, and then after my shift, I would sit and code until I'd go home about 5:30 or 6. I did a lot. I read some, and actually I kind of made the mistake where I just jumped on frameworks, and that's I have the scars from that. But yeah, I read a lot of documentation, Mozilla Developer Network. I'm writing links so we can get to these in a moment. But MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, great stuff on there. And then having conversations with people. Yeah.
So a second part to that question then. So when you got your first paying job as a developer, how'd you do that? Did you did you have your website set up? Were you able to show them examples of your work?
Luckily,
know that you were good?
Luckily I just knew the guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's how I got my first job. As for like how I got the present jobs, because I'm assuming that's kind of the answer. Yeah, having a website. So basically, having a website that kind of explains. So this has blog posts in it, but having something that has what you're doing, right? So different things. Here's, I suppose, like what my resume looks like. Whoop. So apparently there are 2-page resumes now. Apparently that's a thing. And all that. So peter.coffee is my web address, so you can find this stuff up there. I'd say this definitely got me my next gig. But at the same time, like I got lots of jobs on Twitter. People being like, "Oh, hey, I saw this thing that you wrote. Can you help us here or do that there?" But it's something like people will ask me, how can I get a job next week? Have you prepped? No. Okay. Prep for about 2 years, and then you can have, so now when you search my name, I've got a bunch of stuff, So yeah, having stuff on GitHub, which is kind of a place where developers store their code for other people to look at. Having stuff there, and as a person that's done hiring, taking a look at people's GitHub profiles really helps me as a hiring manager to be able to determine what you are good at, how you communicate. So yeah, being active in the community will also really, really help your chances. Because if I see you're active in the community, I can see what you're doing. For instance, people can go to LostGrid and see how I engage with the team, how I write code, how I deal with bugs, how I deal with people saying, "Hey, you did this wrong," and I have to say, "Oh, I did." Like those are the things. Like you don't get that in job interviews. You get that in open, and that like being able to expose that to a hiring manager, it's golden. So does that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it starts before you want the job. Start about 1.5 years, 2 years before you want the job.
Right.
Although, I mean, there are other ways, but yeah. Knowing people, yeah. Yeah.
So this is going to sound a little redundant, but this left pad thing just intrigued me.
Mm-hmm.
So this software or whatever was residing on some server, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the programs are written to go fetch it and bring it back to whatever website thing you were doing.
Yep.
Right? So is that done a lot with a lot of different pieces of websites, or picking and choosing these various pieces to pull into a website to make it run the way they want it?
Yep. Yeah. Let's see. Let me. Actually, yeah. Here we go.
'Cause I'm thinking of I don't have that much experience, so I'm thinking it's more like you've got to code it into your website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
you're saying is going out and grabbing it and bringing it in.
Yep. Wow.
And specifying a version that is a known working version,
Mm-hmm.
not to allow any other versions until you test them.
Yeah. So this is what. So you're asking, where does
What are the kind of the mechanics, I guess?
Yeah. So I mean, we can go into. So actually, I'll link. I did a getting started with LostGrid, the library that I have, and it has kind of how you build out these dependencies. But you can see there those dependencies. I know I'm out of the screen, but so those are the dependencies and those are the versions. And actually, that caret there is saying, hey, grab anything 3.9 and up. So those are not hard code, but it's just an example project. But those are the dependencies, and where those are coming from. npmjs.com, and
that's a configuration file. It's saying I want these particular modules to be brought in to my project, and these versions, or
yep.
So in other words, you're writing one line of code to go get that, rather than have all that code sitting on your.
Yep. And you can. The cool thing is, so you don't have to store that code.
Right. That's
it's fantastic. Fantastic and scary. And that's why some people actually they don't do it this way. They actually will then download it, bring it into their org, and bring it into their management, and they'll either maintain it themselves. And but yeah, that's so yeah. Then basically they go here, and there's different releases that they can get. So 7.1.0.
So that if you had hard coded that into there, you wouldn't have the problem with left pad going down. You would have still been able to use it, correct?
If you had hard coded it, you mean like brought it into your organization? Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. It's your code at that point.
Okay.
You manage it. You don't get any of the advantages of it being updated.
Updated, right.
But yeah, it's yours then. However, in the instance of left pad, it literally went away. So even if you had hard-coded your version number, said don't get me any new versions, it quite literally just disappeared. So that was kind of a different instance where actually now NPM, which is it Node Package Man? Anyway, I digress. That's another nickel-plated moose is what it's called today. Anyway, you can. I love this. I love this so much. What does NPM stand for? You just keep clicking. It's awesome. Anyway, they actually now have rules rules introduced that will not allow you to delete things, and they actually are putting some protections in there. So I couldn't go delete lost. It just wouldn't happen, but I could still do foolish things with it. So, yeah. So I know those super high level, but yeah. So you have in there a configuration file that says go get these, and it goes and gets them.
And what the beauty of the web is, whether you just want to do basic HTML and CSS sites, you can do that.
Yep. If
you want to build interactive sites with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery, you could do that. Right?
Yep.
If you want to build back-end sites built with PHP, a database such as MySQL, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, you can do that.
Yep.
And you can just keep going up and up, but up the scale. But you really, if you want to be great, you have to understand CSS. You have to understand HTML. You have to understand JavaScript.
Yep.
The world of script kiddies, of copying and pasting code, doesn't scale very well for your career. My 2 cents.
Yeah. So there's this site called Yeoman. It's a tool that allows you to basically say, I want to build a React site. Give me a React site, and it'll scaffold, if you will, or I think there's different terms they're called generators. The team behind it, these are amazing developers. These are just super intelligent people that I, in a sense, call some of these people the unicorns, right? They're just like, this Audiosmani guy, he just makes me depressed sometimes. His code is beautiful. It's amazing. He just always is writing new packages. I'm curious if he has a life outside of code, though. Anyway, I digress. He's awesome. So there's a lot of really, really great people behind this Yeoman tool, but the problem is I see people and they're like, so I got this project using Yeoman and it's broken. How do I fix it? Well, if you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, sometimes actually I don't want to help people because I'm not helping them. Anyway. So yeah, sites like this are great if you want to quote unquote spike. I want to just play with this thing, but yeah, these get people in trouble. Kind of as the copy pasta, would you call it copycats or
script kiddie?
Script kiddie, yeah, where they basically it's
R&D, rob and duplicate.
It's pretty common that I'll see people submit code for me to review, and it's in completely different indentations, and I wouldn't say but the style is all different than other code. I'm like, where did you get that? Oh, I found it on Stack Overflow. So do you know what actually is happening? No, I got it on Stack Overflow. Answer my question.
But you can be that person if you want.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with it. And that's one thing it's hard. I think that, okay, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you just need to get your grandma's site up because she needs it for knitting class that night, yeah, you might have to hack some here and there. But be aware of what you're hacking and know what you're doing. And know that you might be doing something you might regret later. I think that's fine. Yeah. Yes?
How mobile aware do you think those sites need to be these days? Because we seem to be going from the desktop to,
Sure.
Not apps, but just basically.
Yeah, so.
On Android.
Yeah, so question, how mobile aware do sites need to be? It depends. If you are a site that 99% of your traffic is coming from mechanics that are in their shop on one of those computers that has those mats over the keyboard, and they're only viewing on that, you don't need to write a mobile site. You do not need to go it's not necessary. Yeah, maybe Google will not like you as much, but what's your target audience? I will say lots of sites need to be that are not. If you are working on a new site from the ground up, depends on what you are. An example might be Asana. Hello, am I out of time? Anyway, Asana.
Be careful.
So this is a task management. They do not have a mobile version of their site because they have a mobile app, and they don't need to be resource intensive as far as they don't need to don't need to have good SEO. Although this is their marketing site and this is mobile, but the app itself is not. So it really depends. But if you're making a marketing site, you should probably start mobile and build up. So yeah.
How do you think we should be active on GitHub, or how can we be active?
How can you be active on GitHub? Fantastic question. Look for the tag help wanted. I'll put that on the post and dive in. There's actually some really cool projects that there's actually like some healthcare projects where they're doing like cancer research, and you can contribute to it. You can write JavaScript for it that will actually help contribute to cancer research. It's all open. You can submit code, and if they accept it, you are curing cancer in a way. And yeah, so just look for the tag help wanted on GitHub, and you'll find tons of projects. Or have you ever submitted a pull request to GitHub?
No.
Find spelling errors and do it. Go to search GitHub and find spelling errors, whether it's in the code and someone wrote a comment that had a spelling error or grammatical error. Fix those. Submit a pull request. I, as a developer of a library, sometimes I write things and I miss them, or it's super helpful to have someone submit a pull request that says, hey, here's a spelling error, I found this, or improve documentation. For instance, like the documentation site for LostGrid, it needs a lot of help. Every documentation site does. So yeah, go help write documentation. If you don't think you can start writing for the library or the framework, write documentation and help improve grammar, things like that.
Bilal, Peter needs help.
Yeah.
Get involved with Peter's open source project.
So, I mean, when you contribute to code, does that mean you have to actually go through all the existing code and understand it? So that you can
It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're fixing a spelling error, you don't have to understand the underlying core API, no. It really depends. If the change you're making feel like if you need to, I suppose that's for the maintainer to also understand. But yeah, it depends on the change. If you're making core architecture, yes, please. But so yeah. But I mean, yeah, feel free to ping me on Twitter, and yeah, I'll answer any of those. I can even point you to some places that need help as well. So, yeah.
I was going to say that's a great idea to add to that GitHub question. Could you also see that as like a success? Just on my second semester, like that's kind of building my name out there and almost treat it like a free internship.
Absolutely.
Things like that, right?
Oh yeah, and the cool thing is this Adias Mani guy, who is kind of like in the world of like JavaScript, I've communicated with him directly through helping him on some project. Like this guy, that he's actually even helped me on some stuff. Like you can engage with these people. You can just like submit a pull request to one of the most popular libraries out there, and people will see it and engage with it. Now you can't be like foolish, but this is the world we live in. Like React, for instance. If you see something you want to change, you can just do it. Even the CSS language or the JavaScript language, they're on GitHub. You can submit ideas to languages. Even like raising your hand and saying, hey, this might be done different. Like these are things you can do. In that, you get to learn how to engage with people from different cultures, different backgrounds. I work with a lot of people in Russia. I've had to learn that ship it means something different in American Russian versus American or English. Words, I can use them. But yeah, so yeah, it's amazing. And then you get to learn how to submit pull requests. Like that, first time you submit a pull request, that you should be like scared the first time because it's like something new. But I'd much rather you be scared submitting a pull request for a copy change, just changing some text, than core underlying framework things. That's what you do like 4 or 5 years later. But you get your start with those tiny little pull requests that change 1 or 2 little things. That's actually how I got into the open source community. There was a tiny little bug in LostGrid. I solved it. I submitted a change. It literally actually was just changing a version number in that dependency list, and voila. And next thing I know, I'm actually the core maintainer of it. So yeah, it'll teach you so many things. And as a hiring manager, I get to see how you engage. And if you're curious, so this is what a GitHub profile looks like.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Okay. So this is what one looks like. You can see kind of my repositories that I commit to, but then you see this, right? So this is my activity. So you can see whenever I made 18 contributions, and you can just dive in and be like, well, what'd you do? And you can take a look at the commits and be like, whoa, hey, this is kind of cool. I like how he, writes his commit message. This is my personal site, so the commit messages aren't perfect, but you can see, it's an amazing tool to see what people are doing.
So I can see this on you.
Yeah, no, this totally public. You can write, you can see exactly what I did, right? So as ESLint, you can see this, boom, and this also happened to break the build. Yay! But yeah, you can read every single thing that I have committed, every single one. Hey, fix this spelling error. Heck yeah, simple fix. But yeah, every single change that I made is publicly available. There are private repositories that are not, but yeah, it's all right here.
Just be prepared that not everyone may be as friendly to your suggestions.
Yeah.
Okay, as you may think that they are.
Yeah, I submitted one change where I thought I was fixing a spelling error. I'm like, no, that's how you spell it in Britain. It's kind of embarrassing. I think it was actually bourbon or something like that. Whiskey. It was whiskey. There we go. I tried to fix spelling. But yeah, you see, this is my commit message. Adds that. This is fantastic. Like, people can jump in here and see exactly what I did. And as a hiring manager, this is gold. So yeah, feel free to find. Yeah, it's all.
One more question for Peter. Who's gonna finish this roller coaster up? Come on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been a lot of fun.